Welcome back to the Natural Balance Hoof Care Corner. And this week it's going to take us to a slightly different venue than what we've had before. As you may know, we're driven somewhat by the people who watch our show. And we've had a number of requests for people wanting more information about mules and how to take care of their feet, what's good, what's bad. Is there a lot of myths out there about differences between horses' feet and mules' feet? And although we're not experts, we have had a lot of experience. And so we're going to share some of that with you this week. And a lot of the things that we've experienced with horses and natural balance and the way Mother Nature takes care of their feet apply almost parallel exactly with those of the mules and donkeys. Although their feet are slightly different, we're going to try to share with you some of the similarities and how we use some of these same principles to deal with the feet on mules as well as donkeys. So anyway, we're going to take this nice young mule here and walk her for you, and we'll show you. That's where we start with all of them, is watching them walk, and we'll guide you along with what we see and what we think is important. So the thing that we look for in mules and as well as horses is how they engage the ground. Obviously, if you're going to use these guys in the mountains, you certainly don't want them stumbling and falling around. So it's important to keep the feet as nice and tidy as possible. If you notice, this one's walking quite nicely, even though her feet and toes look fairly long, and that was the thing that seemed to catch my eye originally, was that it seems as though she has such a long toe. She's just enough of an athlete, though. She handles it very nicely. We're going to make some changes, we think. I haven't looked at the bottom of her feet yet, but the thing that we like to do is get a good evaluation before we start. That way, if we make some changes, either to the better or for the worse, we'll know that where we started from is at least where we started. I want to just talk to you a little bit about what we see here with this type of foot. And as I mentioned before, I thought their toes were just a little bit long. And what I mean by that is that most people feel as though mules have to be very much upright, as you see the appearance of a lot of donkeys, but it isn't necessarily so. They have feet just like horses that are different. Not very many horses have feet that are exactly the same. Mules are somewhat the same as that, although they have a basic donkey characteristic about them. And what we're going to do is map this foot out from the bottom, just like we do the horse's feet. We'll try to find the widest part and go from there. But you'll see the toes on the back feet particularly just look extremely long, and even though they seem straight on the front side, we're not necessarily going to raise her up, but we are going to make her more efficient, we think. This is the shoe that's on her, and we pulled it off, cleaned the nails out and whatnot, and as you can see, it has long heels. That's kind of typical for mule shoes. The only thing that's different than what I like to see in a mule shoe is that the front looks very much like a hind shoe, and this oftentimes happens with horses as well as mules, in that the toe ends up getting longer than it should be. You can actually see a scoop in the front of this mule's foot, which is uncommon for the most part, but it can happen. A lot of it is because of the design of the shoe and how it was placed on the foot. And we're going to map this foot out just like we do with a horse's foot. We're going to find the live sole, establish where the widest part of that foot is, and then bisect it equally on both sides. So what I'm going to do here, I've cleaned this off, just removing some of the chalky material. I'm going to do the same right out across this toe. And you can see how this has been stretched from here out. It's just gradually pulling forward, which is giving her that long look that she really doesn't deserve. I'm going to draw this line around here, all the way around. Now I want you to take a close look at this to show you how this foot has become, maybe possibly trimmed a little this way, but it's become higher on this outside than it is on this side here. Okay, you can see now that I've drawn the line on there that the distance from the sole, exfoliated sole, to the ground surface of the wall is shorter than it is on this side here by about good 1/8 of an inch or so. So we use the same basic principles with lateral medial balance with mules as well as we do with horses. I'm going to trim just a little of the frog off right back here. This is a very nice healthy frog, and I'm not going to interrupt that. I want it to bear weight on whatever I put underneath of this, whether it's the ground or a pad. So that's basically how we start this out. Again, I'm going to find the widest part of that. By drawing this line around here, you can establish where that widest part is, the same as we do with the horses. This side is starting to roll over, as you can see, and that indicates that this heel is higher than the other one as well. This is very common with mules' feet, donkeys' feet, and horses' feet. The thing about mules and donkeys is that any amount of distortion, like this side being higher, they distort more rapidly, meaning this heel will curl over very quickly if it's left taller than the other side. So drawing my lines around here, there's the widest part of that arc. I'm going to draw the line there, and I'm just going to, now if we bisect this, look at the distance from there to there and what is out in front here, you can see how this whole foot has become very badly distorted. About 1 inch ahead of that, or slightly less because this is a mule's foot, is where we're going to put breakover. And it seems like an unrealistic expectation to expect that breakover to be there. The type of shoe that we're going to use has some breakover built into it, so the actual front of the shoe is going to be there. The thing that we're going to be it's going to be very important, and it's very critical when you're doing mules, is if you ever trim them very short, they'll never forget you for that, and you'll have difficulties from that time forward. So just keep in mind, this line that we've drawn around here is critical, especially for mules and donkeys, because they don't like to be trimmed too short.
Welcome back to the Natural Balance Hoof Care Corner. We'll pick up where we left off last week, working on the front feet of this mule.
Okay, we're going to start trimming, leaving the trailing portion of our nippers out, and the same guidelines basically we're going to use on a mule's foot. I want approximately 1/8 of an inch or so above the level of the sole left, just behind this line that I've drawn here at the widest part of the foot. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I want those distances to be the same. Now, because this side was higher, I'm going to trim less off of this side here. Now that I've got the heels somewhat prepared, I'm going to start right here with the trailing portion, because I'm going that direction. Trailing portion of the nippers, I'll trim above this line that I've drawn over the sole area and come out up in this region here. So now I've trimmed the outer hoof wall exactly to the level that I've drawn of the line that I've drawn at the level of the sole. Again, the key to that is to prepare the sole ahead of time by removing the exfoliating material and find the waxy surfaces all the way around the sole surface. Okay, now that we've got this roughed in, I'm going to go ahead and just smooth it up flat to accept a flat shoe, and I'll rasp this area at the heel first, get it prepared, get this heel prepared, and then I'll rasp over the front until that line just disappears, and you can see just a trace of the sole at the toe. Just remove the line. I've got plenty of protection there. You can see how this wall is kind of pointed where it should be more rounded. It's actually stretched from here to there. And as you can, if you remember, I said that mules' feet can distort more easily than horses, and they can also repair more quickly as well. It's just that they're so much more malleable. They're incredibly tough. So you can sort of see a pillar right there. There's a little island right there. We're going to go to the front now, take care of some of this distortion. We'd like to have this wall as uniform as possible from this quarter all the way around the front. As you can see, there is a flare on this foot. It starts actually way up high, kind of up in this area here, so there's a lot more than what you'd imagine. This foot, because mules' feet don't go to to flares and flatten out like so many of the horse's feet. You don't notice these flares until you look closely at the bottom and see the indifferences of where the toe has been driven forward. So I'm going to rasp this back. And I do this before I shape a shoe to that foot. As you notice, I pointed out that there was a lot of the lamina that had actually been stretched as well. So we're going to take that into consideration when we start going back to the sole side and looking at this. So, little radius around the corner. And I'll follow the ring that leads around to the side of the foot. And where it disappears, that's where the flare stops. Okay. Now you look at those 2 feet standing side by side, and one looks substantially shorter than the other. Granted, there's a shoe on the other foot, but it's actually just a very thin shoe. You can see it's just not much more than 1/4 of an inch. This is the amount of foot that I took off of the left front. This is the amount of heel that I took off the lateral side, which was half as much as I took off the medial side. This is the most important part of looking at a horse's foot or a mule's foot, is the distortion that occurs from this bend right here. It's very misleading, and if you fit a shoe to that each and every time, it will cause the wrinkles that you see here and here. This toe bending this direction actually causes that heel to be driven forward. Mules have got an incredibly good back part of their foot, as long as the front part is under control as well. And I think this is the thing that's oftentimes misunderstood about mules' feet, in that a lot of myths say that, well, you need to stand them up. And a lot of horses, a lot of people believe that that's what needs to happen with horses as well. But you can see simply by the 2 feet here that I've taken as much or more off the heel of this foot, and actually the angle looks better simply because I've eliminated the distortion on the front of the foot, where before there was just the foot had migrated forward. Back here, take a look at the sole side. As you can see, I've taken into consideration the extra stretch that had occurred here on the dorsal aspect of this foot. As you can see here, I'm just drawing a line around the sole surface here. And you see the thickness here is comparable to that in all directions. And that's basically what we're looking at. We haven't over-trimmed the bottom of her foot, and it's now nice and uniform. The heels have got relatively the same curvature. And so we're just going to go with this. I'm going to touch this heel just a little bit more and level it. Just make sure we got it nice and flat. And I'm going to use a natural balance shoe, and I do on a lot of these mules use a natural balance shoe. This one, of course, seems to fit her nicely, at least in heel width and where I want to put the break over. As I mentioned before, I'm going to put that break over right in this general area. So I'm going to have a slight amount of that toe hanging over. And you have to keep in mind that the mules are no different than horses in that respect, in that if you had this mule using her barefooted in an environment that would maintain her feet by themselves, you would see that they would wear their foot equally all the way around all around the sole surface. That's Mother Nature's guideline to maintaining the balance of the foot from a medial lateral perspective, meaning that the hoof wall will wear itself equal to the level of the sole all the way around. Mules, just like horses, will wear the toe of their shoe out before they'll wear the rest of it out. And that's simply the way they leverage over the top of it. It's just the phenomena, it's the way they maintain the front part of their foot. That's the part that keeps the front part of the foot under control. It's a natural wear process in light of the inferior check ligament here just below the knee, keeps this tendon tight. The rest of the musculature does not yield to that. So that's how they deal with the front part of their foot. How the back part is maintained naturally is by the environment. If the environment is not conducive to wear on the back part of the foot in an optimal way, that's what farriers are for. That's what we have to look at. And looking at the way the foot naturally wears are the guidelines that we use to maintain and shoe these guys. So understanding that in the best possible way gives us guidelines on how to prevent lamenesses, prevent stumbling, and overcome a lot of the things that we've been somewhat plagued with over the years. So simply just following Mother Nature's guidelines seems to give us the best information about how to take care of these guys.
That's all the time we have for this week. Join us next week as we finish shoeing the front feet of this mule. Welcome back to the Natural Balance Hoof Care Corner. We finished up the hoof preparation on the front feet last week and will now continue with the application of the shoe.
Now, I've got this shoe shaped. Got it just to where it just fits this foot nicely around the edge. I've got it placed here at the breakover point that I've selected. And again, the reason why I'm using this shoe and use them for horses as well is that they have that natural wear built right into them. Where a standard steel shoe, it would take half a month or 30 days to start grinding that toe the way it would become more comfortable for them. This way, it's reinforced in the front, the shoe's going to last a bit longer, and it's wear that is naturally built into it. It has kind of a radius across here. It's not really square. So this radius will allow them to go whichever direction they find it more comfortable. It's also higher on this inside rim than it is here, so they can move off of themselves just a little bit easier. Now, this being southern Colorado, this mule is going to be going to the mountains for hunting, and they're likely to encounter some snow. So what we're going to do, we use this hard plastic pad that we have specially made for a lot of different purposes, and it works extremely well for this job as well. The snow can't stick to this. It's warmer underneath, so it's going to keep it insulated. Keep this just a little more warmth to this than the outside temperature, so the snow just won't stick to it. We're going to drill the heels of this shoe and drive in some studs. I don't like to put studs up in front for the most part. I know they're used a lot, but I think it a lot of times just doesn't allow them to move over the front of their foot as well. And I noticed that most every one of them that I used to use boreum or studs in the front, they always seemed to forge, just simply because they couldn't get out of the way of themselves. Now there's times probably when it's really necessary, so I'm not going to be too critical of that, because if they slide over the side of a mountain for the lack of a couple of studs, then they're shortcutting yourself. But I think that most of them do very well with heel studs. And for that reason, mules especially, because they're really a lot more sure-footed than horses, they work extremely well. We're going to pack this foot with a product called Magic Cushion. It's proven to be one of the most helpful tools we have for keeping the environment underneath the foot absolutely pristine. It's really quite a deal. It has some capsation in it. We're going to add just a little bit of oakum over the top. It's kind of a binder. It makes sure that it stays inside of this pad that we're going to put on. It doesn't take a whole lot, just a little covering. I'm going to let her stand on this and smash it into the foot so it's good and level. So when I put my pad on, then I won't have this thing rocking around. So anyway, I usually throw a little piece of paper on it, especially if I'm at somebody else's house and on their mats, because it does have a kind of a sticky characteristic to it. So at least this won't leave a big spot on the floor. Just pull that away. And we'll get this set kind of where we had it originally planned. Right to the very back of the frog here. Remember, I've trimmed her very conservatively, simply because it not only helps with the sole pressure issues, but as well as nailing issues. You just about can't get it wrong, especially with these mules like this that have a very straight wall. The rest of this process is pretty normal stuff. Just getting them clinched down. I've left this a little bit broader here at the heel area, and I safe it off. The shoes are safed off, but even with these pads. And on the front, it's a matter of just undercutting this toe just a little bit. We don't want to take this clear down to the level of the shoe. Just undercut it to get it kind of out of the way. Okay, we've got the left front finished and the right one's yet to do. This will show you very easily how distortions and whatnot can be very misleading. Because in reality, what we've done is we've actually lowered the angle of this hoof, but we've brought it back underneath. It gives you the appearance that that foot is standing up. And I believe that the myths that have been created around mules' feet that have been naturally worn, appearing to be somewhat upright, are just because they don't have the distortion on the front end. It's been taken care of in the natural wear process of just rolling that toe. And I think this is a misconception about horses as well. We'd like to all see them all standing up, and I think the pastern alignment is of paramount importance, but there's more to it than just raising the heel. You have to consider where the heel is in relationship to the back of the foot. We were able to trim this heel a little more efficiently and move it back just a little bit and not jeopardize the alignment of the pastern. In fact, it looks as though this may be even broken forward. So if you had to take more heel off, it wouldn't be a bad thing. So, but it's again the distortion that seems to keep us in the dark about some of these issues that oftentimes create the lamenesses that we're trying to overcome. Okay, we're going to go ahead and work on the back one here. As you can see, the distance here from that widest part forward is got much greater, 2 times greater. And I'm surprised that this donkey doesn't stumble a bit just because of that. But it just shows you what athletes they are. They can get around just about anything. But over a period of time, if they have this longer foot, they're more likely to end up with joint problems and the likes of that, simply because they're not balanced efficiently. If Mother Nature had her way with this, she would have this hoof wall worn off and that toe worn back and this heel worn so that this would be the back part of the foot and this would be the front. So through this region, it would be divided equally. So that's basically all we're going to do, is just follow those simple guidelines that we know to be the best for this animal. That's using this sole as a guide. Exfoliating it to find your references is, of course, the key to finding where balance is.
Welcome back to the Natural Balance Hoof Care Corner. Last week we finished up the shoeing of the front feet of this mule and started working on the back feet. We'll go ahead and get right back into working on the hind feet.
If Mother Nature had her way with this, she would have this hoof wall worn off and that toe worn back and this heel worn so that this would be the back part of the foot and this would be the front. So through this region, it would be divided equally. So that's basically all we're going to do, is just follow those simple guidelines that we know to be the best for this animal. That's using this sole as a guide. Exfoliating it to find your references is, of course, the key to finding where balance is. Just going to scrape away enough here. Again, keep in mind, these mules don't like to be trimmed too close, so we're going to be very conservative about how much of that hoof wall we take off relative to the sole. Draw my line around here. There's obviously the widest part of that, right in there. And it's about 3/4 of an inch back from the apex frog. This being a smaller foot, it's a little different than a horse in that respect. Okay, I'm going to trim just a smitten off this heel. Even though the frog is down farther than the heel, that's all right. The myth that the frog is not supposed to be in contact with the ground is a misconception. In my experience, in my opinion, with mules, they need to be in contact with the ground just as horses do, for the same basic reasons. Okay, we've trimmed this off to the level of the sole. You can see I've got just a little bit more on this side to reduce that height in order for it to be equal on this side here. So before I go any farther, I'm going to reduce that. That's going to be my first step, because when I blend this whole foot, I'll have at least all my references established. Then it's a matter of just blending the rest of the foot in with all of the different points. I got equal distances underneath here. I've just touched the sole there. I've just erased that line there. Okay, and for the most part, it's pretty flat all the way down. I don't look down this foot to see lateral medial balance. I'm just looking down to see if I get any high spots. Now, we're not going to put a pad on this foot. As you notice, this frog sticks down here, at least the thickness of the shoe. You can see how it protrudes. It's going to be its own little snowball removal system, and it's amazing how well that works. The shoe is just going to be attached around it, and it'll protrude down through there. So there's my widest part. I want the shoe to extend to the back of the frog, which is going to lengthen this area here. I'm going to bring the breakover back so it comes right about in here. So now I have actually a greater proportion of foot ground surface mass back here than I do up front, right? This is a Victory Elite Hind. You see it's got a bit of a roll to it as well. And with a bit of shaping, I can get that modified very nicely for her. Just need to make sure that I have some clearance down through the sides here. It's so nice to have this foot supported in this manner here, and I think that mules especially like this. They don't like to be raised, lowered, pulled around, lifted, jerked around. Once they get their foot onto this stand, they just really like it. So I think in that, just like horses, everybody seems to like the support that's given from that. And one of those make it easy kind of tools. Same principle applies here. We're just going to take away what seems to be out of a direct line from the top. And I let my rasp kind of guide me on that. This toe has really somewhat migrated forward. I'm going to back it up just a little bit. If you notice that shoe that I had on there, there's going to be a bit of overhang, so I'll just round that off just a little bit. Take care of the rest of it after I get the shoe on. There's my breakover line. It's about 1 1/8 inches ahead. The shoe, there's the breakover point over the top of that line. And I like to see the shoe come right to the very back of the frog. This particular type is going to be fairly straight through here just to give us the clearance. But all in all, it's not difficult to get these shoes modified, whether you use this type or any other type, or if you decide to use a mule shoe. The thing that I believe is important is that you have some of that accent in the front already built into it, so that they don't have to wear the relief off right off the bat. The thing about adjusting the breakover so that you're balancing the foot from its widest part, equal proportions on both ends, is that eventually this foot is going to seek out that same conformation, and that's been distorted, even though as subtle as it is, will eventually go away, and it'll go away more quickly on a mule's foot than it will a horse's foot. So in a period of 2 to 3 shoeings, if you've got them shod, then it'll take care of itself. The distortion will go away, and you get back to that natural look again. Very easy to manage. You won't have to end up with the potential for lameness issues down the road. Again, same thing with what to do with the toe. It's a matter of just undercutting it. If you didn't do anything with it, it would wear itself away. It wouldn't chip, wouldn't break. It would just gradually wear itself away. But cosmetically, we do it, it tends to give you the appearance that the foot is in a more natural shape. We're going to give her a little walkabout here now that we've got her shod. And as you can see, the way of going has changed a little bit. She was landing decently before, but now she's landing very noticeably heel first. Nice long stride, heel first, real strong heel first engagement. Pretty impossible for a horse or a mule like this to stumble when they walk, engage the ground in this manner. So just food for thought. A lot of these ideas are a little different than most of us are accustomed to, but if you stop and analyze it, it really does it's good common sense. And I think that if you look at these things, you'll find you'll be able to, first of all, avoid a lot of lameness issues that are derived from hoof distortions. And as this mule is reshod or pulled for the rest of the winter or whatever, her foot's going to be in much better shape. She's not likely to distort as she was before. Thanks again for tuning in each week. This has been a lengthy series, but I think it's real important, and it's certainly what we're trying to provide for the horse owners, those mule enthusiasts. Hopefully this information will give you some worthwhile guidelines to manage your friends with. So thanks very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.